Hi, and welcome back to Florida's Best Practices for 4th grade Multiplication and Division Problem Solving. I'm Amy. Take a look at the two images on your screen. How many times have we as teachers given students a problem? They just pick up the numbers, choose an operation, and don't really understand what it's asking. In this unit, there's going to be a lot of problem solving where students are really going to need to show their work. So we need to make sure that they're showing their work and really understanding what these problems are asking them. In this unit, multiplication and division problem solving, students will be solving real-world problems for multiplication and division. The division may also have a remainder where the students will have to interpret that in different ways. Students will also be determining and explaining whether an equation in multiplication and division is true or false. They will be writing equations involving multiplication or division and defining the unknown, and exploring multiplication and division of multi-digit whole numbers using estimation, rounding, and place value. What does student learning look like in the classroom? Students will be using tape diagrams to show their comparison for multiplicative comparison models. They can also transfer that model into their notebook for the problem that they're working on. Students will also be creating their own models for multiplicative comparison. They can then write an equation and use a letter for the missing number. Students will also be solving division problems. In these division problems, they will have a remainder, which they will then have to interpret to figure out what the remainder actually represents in the problem that they are working on. Students will be using multiplication and division to determine if equations are true or false. They can use an equal sign to determine if it's true, or put a slash through the equal sign to state that that is an unequal equation. Students will also be estimating using multiplication and division. You can see on the screen that they are using a letter to represent a variable. Students will estimate to solve in order to find out if their answer is reasonable or not. What does student learning sound like in the classroom? Here are some of the math chat cards from STEMscopes. What process did you use to find a missing total? Having students explain what they did to find their unknown. What does the letter represent in the multiplication equation? Knowing that the letter is not just there, that it actually means there's a missing number. How do you know when to ignore the remainder? Making sure students know what to do with the remainder in each problem and how to interpret it each time. How did you determine whether an equation was true or false? Having students share their strategies for how they knew if the equation was true or false. How did using arrays and area models help us with rounding and estimation? When students estimate or round their numbers, how does using those arrays and area models help them determine if it's close or not? Here is some vocabulary that students will need to know to be successful in this unit. Division, equation, estimation, factor, multiplication, product, quotient, remainder, and rounding. How will students demonstrate their knowledge in this unit? Here's an example from STEMscopes from an Explore activity where students are using a tape diagram to model a multiplicative comparison problem. Here's a show what you know using multiplication and division with problem solving, and the students will have to show their equation and work and how they solved it. There are also fluency builder activities. This one is a tic-tac-toe game board where students will have to answer cards in each of the parts in order to get tic-tac-toe. Here are some questions to ask to gauge student understanding. Here's a sample problem that will have a remainder. and the students will have to determine what to do with that remainder and how to interpret it. Here's another problem where students have to figure out if the equation is true or false. And here's another example where the students will have to use multiplication or division with an unknown in order to find the answer. Here's an engaging task or activity to do at home. Students will use the sentence starters that are listed here, giving different numbers and items, and hopefully they can make it funny after they solve the problem. Thank you so much for joining us on this best practices from 4th grade multiplication and division problem solving. We hope you got a lot out of it and things that you can use in your classroom. We will see you next time.